Okay, so picture this. There's a superpower out there, one that lets you achieve some pretty extraordinary things. The catch? It's a skill that most of us have kinda lost in this crazy, noisy, hyper-connected world we live in. But here's the good news. Mastering it is the key to absolutely thriving. So let's figure out how to get it back.
To really get this, we got to go back in time, all the way back to 1922. The famous psychologist Carl Jung, he decides to build this simple two-story stone house right by Lake Zurich. He just calls it the Tower. And get this, he has the only key. Nobody, and I mean nobody, gets in without his say-so.
Now you might be thinking, nice vacation spot. But Jung wasn't there to relax. Nope. He was practicing a lost art. And art that, believe it or not, has become maybe the single most valuable skill you can have in our modern economy. And today, we're talking about how you can reclaim that art for yourself.
See, Jung was there doing something that author Cal Newport would, years later, give a name to: deep work. Jung he instinctively got it. He knew a principle that we've almost completely forgotten today. If you want to create something that has real, lasting value, you have to shut out the world first.
So what is deep work exactly? Well, it's not just, focusing. It's way more intense than that. It's about doing your work in a state of complete distraction-free concentration, so deep that it pushes your brain to its absolute limit. Now, be honest. Think about your typical workday. How often does that actually happen, right? Our tools, email, Slack, you name it, they're basically designed to do the exact opposite. They're built to chop up our attention into tiny little pieces, making this deep state feel almost impossible to reach.
And this brings us to the really big idea here. It's like a classic supply and demand thing. The ability to do deep work is getting rarer and rarer, and at the exact same time, its value in the economy is just skyrocketing. The people who can actually cultivate this skill, they're the ones who are going to lead, innovate, and basically build the future. You could almost say deep work is the new currency. It's that valuable.
Okay, so if it's so valuable, why is it so ridiculously hard to do? Well, every good story needs a villain, right? And in our story, the villain is that constant feeling of being busy. It's that never-ending stream of pings, dings, and notifications. This is that invisible force that holds us back from making any real progress.
And this villain actually has a name. It's called attention residue. And this isn't just some made-up term. It's a real, scientifically proven thing. Here's how it works. Every single time you switch from one task to another, a little piece of your attention, a residue, gets left behind, still chewing on that last email or that text you just glanced at.
Let's walk through what this actually feels like. Imagine you're deep in it, writing a really important report. Your phone buzzes. You think, oh, I'll just take a quick peek. It's an email. You look, then you try to get back to the report, but it's too late, isn't it? That residue from the email, maybe a question from your boss or a complaint from a client, is now stuck in your head, just completely poisoning your focus.
So that quick glance you took, it wasn't harmless at all. What it really means is that you're now trying to do something complex with a brain that's not running at full power. You're essentially choosing to work with a handicap, almost all the time.
But okay, does this attention stuff really matter in the real world? Oh, you have no idea. Let me tell you a true story about a guy named Jason Ben. His life was totally transformed the moment he decided to fight back against all this distraction.
So Jason was working as a financial consultant. He was basically a human spreadsheet, making around $40,000 a year. And then one day, he has this absolutely terrifying moment. He writes a simple little computer script and realizes it can do his entire job. And one afternoon, he had pretty much made himself economically worthless.
So what does he do? Something totally radical. He quits his job, decides he's going to become a programmer, a skill he knows zero about. And for the first few months, his training is completely offline. He literally locked himself in a room with no computer, just books and a highlighter, to basically rebuild his brain's focus muscle from scratch. And it worked. By the fourth month, he could manage 5 hours of deep, totally disconnected concentration every single day.
And the payoff for all that? Just 6 months after he started, he lands a developer job at a tech startup for $100,000 a year. See, he didn't just learn to code. He mastered the skill of learning things quickly. That is the superpower of deep work.
But it's not all about the money, not even close. There's this incredibly deep psychological reward that you get from this kind of intense focus. It's really the difference between ending your day feeling totally drained and ending it feeling deeply fulfilled.
Think about a master blacksmith, a guy named Rick Furr. His work requires absolute, total concentration. And the result isn't just a beautiful Viking sword, it's this feeling of profound peace and satisfaction. Now compare that to the shallow life so many of us live, feeling fried and toasted by this constant whirlwind of emails, meetings, and office politics. Deep work is the alternative. It's like opening a portal to a world that's full of meaning.
And there's a real brain science reason for this feeling. It comes down to this. Your world is literally the sum of what you pay attention to. When you choose to focus intensely on one challenging thing, you're basically starving all the anxious, negative parts of your brain. And instead, you're feeding the parts that find meaning and satisfaction and even wonder in the world.
All right, so let's say you're on board. You're thinking, okay, I want the economic rewards and I definitely want that psychological satisfaction. But how in the world do you even begin when your brain feels like it's already hardwired for distraction?
Well, the answer might not be what you expect. The journey doesn't start with trying to build a bunch of small habits. It starts with one big, bold first step. Something dramatic.
Here's a great example. J.K. Rowling. She was struggling to finish the very last Harry Potter book. At home, she was getting distracted by everything. Dogs barking, window cleaners, you name it. So what was her solution? She made what's called a grand gesture. She checked herself into a suite at a 5-star hotel, creating a space where there was literally nothing else to do but finish that book.
And that's the whole principle of the grand gesture. It's when you make a big investment, either of money or effort, that sends a crystal clear signal to your brain that says, hey, pay attention, this is important. You see it with Bill Gates in his famous Think Weeks he takes alone in a cabin. By making a grand gesture, you're raising the stakes on yourself. You're injecting a huge dose of motivation right when you need it most.
So that brings us to the final question, the one for you. Look, you don't have to rent a $1,000 hotel suite, but you do need a way to signal to yourself that you're serious about this. So what grand gesture will you make to finally shut out the noise and reclaim this superpower for yourself?